places as like a concert venue, that the people are just kind of rushing in. And so folks are coming in. Folks are coming in.
To get their seats.
That's right. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
I play a lot of games around, Zoom, how to make it fun for myself.
That's that is beautiful.
So welcome everyone. We will get started in I'll maybe give folks another minute because I want to make sure that we have all the time that we can with Craig.
Yeah.
So glad that you have chosen into this conversation. This is a very important conversation. I am looking forward to learning from Craig and really looking forward to being in conversation with everyone. So just one more, maybe another 30 seconds, and then I'll get us started.
Cool.
And yes, Vernon, thank you. Please introduce yourself. That would be fantastic. Just to see who's here. Name, pronoun, and where you're joining us from. So this is a coast-to-coast experience. I'm out here in Brooklyn, New York, and you are?
I'm outside Oakland, California, in a town called Alameda. So West Coast, East Coast.
Awesome.
Should we bring back the Biggie Smalls Tupac?
No.
Okay.
That was all love anyway.
No, totally.
So
right.
maybe yes, we can bring it back. All love.
Yeah.
All love.
Yeah, all love. Right. Helping each other be great. Step up our game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is actually true in our relationship. So that's awesome.
It's so true. Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started and just keep welcoming folks, loving, seeing, it really is a coast-to-coast experience here.
This is awesome.
We have Maryland and Idaho and Illinois and
Chicago, Hayward, California, East Bay.
That's right. Cool. Okay, so welcome and thank you for joining us on our 5th series of virtual conversations that we are providing for leadership educators. We've had over 1,500 folks register to engage in our first 4 series, and we're excited to come back around with round number 5. The purpose of our time together is to share questions, thoughts, best practices as we continue to reimagine how we deliver engaging leadership programs and to students through virtual programming. So my name is Tanya Williams. I imagine that would be helpful to know. And I am at LeaderShape. I'll do more introduction later when we introduce Craig and I. But we do want to give some instruction to how to use this platform. I imagine a lot of people spend time on Zoom, and I know I like to practice the idea just in case folks don't spend time, you have some information. So feel free to post. We're going to use chat. We're going to keep chat being like moving and excellent. Right. Post your comments and questions in the chat area. We will have a couple of polls that we will post. And there will be some questions that we'll really want you to reflect on and think about and post those answers in the chat as well. If you have a question for the moderator, for Craig, that you do not want to share publicly, you can send Craig a private message, or you can send it to me and I will get it to him, etc. Unfortunately, because we always like to have things really interactive, due to the limited time, we won't allow for folks to come off of camera or microphone. And so I'm gonna do my best to stay on that chat and keep it moving and get the conversation going with us that way. We also, as part of our practice at LeaderShape, we want to really give people a chance to get present. And a way of doing that is to acknowledge the land. And so LeaderShape would like to begin this presentation and really all of our presentations by acknowledging the land that each of us stands on. The original homelands of indigenous people and tribal nations is, I can't speak to the level of importance for us to actually understand and really ground ourselves in. We acknowledge that painful history of genocide and forced removal from these territories, and we honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land. Please honor and acknowledge the native and indigenous peoples from the land that you are joining us from, and give thought to your ancestry and generations that came before you. I am on the land of the Lenape out in New York, and it is important for us to really ground with the moment, to really take that in so that we understand not only from whence we come from, but where we are right now. Craig, do you want to offer your land acknowledgement?
Yeah, definitely. So hi, everyone. I'm Craig, and I come from the lands of the Ohlone in the East Bay of San Francisco Bay Area. And yeah, just, that for the current and past homelands of the Ohlone.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So a little bit about LeaderShape. If you are not familiar with the work of LeaderShape, it is our vision to go after and see a just, caring, and thriving world where all lead with integrity and have a healthy disregard for the impossible. And our mission is to transform the world by increasing the number of people who lead with integrity and have a healthy disregard for the impossible. And so today, all right, we got the really important beginning stuff. Now we get to the uber important stuff. And so excited to welcome Dr. Craig Elliott from Samuel Merritt College in Oakland, who has graciously agreed to assist in the facilitation of this conversation and really share his and others' knowledge around this topic. Craig's full bio is listed with the description of this presentation, but we'll ask him to give a little bit of an introduction and background right now.
Thanks, Tanya. So yeah, Craig, pronouns he, him, and his. I currently serve as the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs at Samuel Merritt University, which is a small private health sciences institution in Oakland, California. I am a co-lead facilitator as part of LeaderShape. I am a longtime friend of Tanya O. Williams, and so serve also just finishing up leadership with ACPA, the College Student Personnel Administration. That's the old name. So it's called Student Educators International right now. And so a little bit of service nationally, lots of local and regional service, but definitely grateful to be here with you all. Thank you all for showing up and talking with us. I have been in California most of my life, and I think what's most important about my life and who I am is that I have two wonderful and amazing kids that ground me and remind me about what love is, and I have an amazing partner that tolerates me because I'm a lot. So so she's earning her sainthood to get into heaven, if you will. But grateful and blessed to be in this family and to have that family and my family of choice. So
fantastic. I'm Tanya Williams, and I am a curriculum specialist with LeaderShape, and like Craig, I have a facilitator. I've been facilitating with LeaderShape for a while, and definitely count LeaderShape as part of my family, and definitely count Dr. Craig Elliott as part of my family as well. And so I am super excited about this conversation about identity-conscious supervision. And so Craig submitted some polling questions for us so that we can really dig into the conversation and get a sense of um, who's here and what you might be looking for from this conversation. And so, Abby, feel free to start our first polling question. So, what level are you? Um, are you an early professional, mid-career professional, seasoned professional? Going to let them keep coming in. I think that this information is pretty important, Craig, right? To
Yeah,
to
yeah,
this topic.
yeah, for sure. I mean, it helps. I mean, it'll certainly help frame our conversation today. So I think it's valuable for that. I realize now I didn't put grad students, so it could be graduate students in there.
Okay,
But I think there's different conversations that we can have, depending.
awesome. So our levels, most folks here are early professionals, and I hear that in what you're saying around being grad students. Some folks are mid-career professionals, and some are
That's
seasoned.
great.
Yeah, so we have a good.
That's great.
Okay. Do I share? Yes. Hopefully now everybody sees that. So I think, Abby, if you want to do the next poll. Yep.
Okay.
So how many years have you been supervising? 1 to 5, 6 to 10. And correct me if I'm wrong, Craig. Supervision doesn't necessarily need to be professional supervision.
Correct. Right. Yeah. There's students and professionals have some different dynamics,
Yeah,
but you're right. It's the experience, and at least the intention for what we want to talk about today is the same. The work that we want to do and how we show up and how we engage.
awesome.
Um,
Right.
okay.
So we got mostly 1 to 5 years, which kind of makes sense given that
Right.
most of the folks are early in their career. Right.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay. And so now we want you to turn to uh, the chat. And you'll see that Abby has put in a question for us. And we'd love for people um, to notice the question and respond to the question in the chat. What is one emotion you're feeling right now about what's happening in the world or in your life? Tell us more about why that question feels important to share, to ask, Craig.
Yeah. So for me, it's context. I love this conversation, and I love talking about leadership and the critical hope and the possibilities that are out there. And I don't want to be disconnected from where I'm at and what's happening in the world around us and where we are. And the world is hard right now in a lot of different ways. So for me, this is helpful just to kind of, for me to get grounded in where we are, but also for us to get grounded in that we're talking about this in context with everything else that's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just noticing that folks are saying hopeful, exhausted, saturated,
Right.
anxious, unsure.
Anxious. Yeah.
I think thank you for asking that question, Craig,
Mm.
um, because it helps us know how we can enter the conversation
Yeah.
together
Right.
as that we're just not
Yeah.
taking off and,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but we're
And
paying attention.
and I noticed even as we were talking about this and I was reading these, I took a deep breath in. And so
Yeah,
I actually think it's a reminder for me to breathe.
absolutely.
When I see when other people share with me where they're at, and it helps me get reconnected with myself too. So
So while you breathe, can we invite everybody to breathe?
yes, yes. What a great, yeah. So let's take a breath and just, I think breathe in acknowledgement about where we are, in whatever space that is, but also breathe in that we're in a community right now and we're together, and that's something joyful. So yeah,
Yeah,
so I invite us to take a breath.
I always tell people Notice when the breath stops in your chest as opposed to
Mm.
going all the way into your belly. So like consciously
Yeah.
take a deeper breath. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Abby, do we have another question? So what is one hope you have for this session? You can check in now that we've grounded ourselves with the
Yeah.
breath. Check in with yourself of like, what's one hope that you have for this session? And the hope actually might have been taken care of by just that breath.
Exactly. Right.
And we have the brilliance of Dr. Craig Elliott here. So
Oh, stop it. I'm
what,
Craig.
what is,
We're friends here.
yeah, we're gonna dig in together, but
Yeah.
what is one hope that you might be having about this session? Craig's, what is a hope for you?
So I would say my inspire, that this be a really, really joyful, fruitful conversation, that I'm inspired, and that people walk away seeing that there's things that they can do, and maybe a first couple steps to of how to make the world a better place. I mean, I think ultimately that all of this book that we wrote, and even these conversations, has been our little part of changing the world. And so if anybody's inspired today, and I feel like then hope is accomplished.
Fantastic. So people are looking for knowledge strategies to be refreshed, awareness, growth, tangible. So what I'm reading in this really goes well with your intention and your hope, in that folks are open.
Yeah.
And I know that you got something to share. And so you mentioned and just to let people know, our guest facilitator teamed up with two other amazing scholars, to publish the book, Identity Conscious Supervision in Student Affairs, Building Relationships and Transforming Systems. This guide offers current and future student affairs practitioners a new conceptual framework for identity conscious and intersectional supervision. So let's jump into the conversation.
Let's jump in. Yeah. Well, before you do that, though, I want to just appreciate and acknowledge Rob Brown and Shruti Desai, the other two co-authors there. And this is a picture from after our pre-con in NASPA, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And so what I think is wonderful about this book, like none of us set out to write a book. This was an idea that we were sitting around at a conference, at a restaurant, and like napkin notes of just talking about how our supervision stories and experiences, about how many of us didn't feel seen in our wholeness, and I think more awfully, if you will, that supervisors were perpetuating oppression, I think, for how I would say that now, and really wanting, and for us, like being in that space of wanting to go do something. So we presented, we said we're going to do a session, and we did that, and that was well received, and that got expanded to a half-day pre-con and then a full-day pre-con, and we did that for a couple of years, and then a publisher, one of the people from Routledge, approached us and said, "I think this would be a phenomenal book. Would you write it?" And that's how it started.
That's
and
fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll also say too, it came out. We wrote it in 2019, published at the end of 2019, early 2020, before all hell broke loose. So grateful for the timing of the universe, but also not. I wish that didn't happen either. That we're talking about identity consciousness differently now, which is good, but that came at a lot of pain and death, and continued violence against Black and Brown and Asian and Indigenous people. So also wanted to honor that.
Yeah. And what I hear in that, Craig, also is like, this officially is the first edition.
Yeah, right. Yes,
Because
yes.
there's so much more to say.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we did, right, there's so much more to say, so much more that we want to do. We could see easily 4 or 5 more volumes of this. And there's so many other ways, like we chose supervision. I mean, I think that's what, as and approaching, trying to imagine how supervision could be transformative in a socially just, identity conscious way, helping us work toward liberation. But it isn't the only way to get there. And so there's so many other aspects of what our work in student affairs and higher education can and should be doing. But yeah, we want to be able to link this and keep going and continuing, and inspire us as higher education's evolving and changing, that we're able to help lead some of those changes, and rebuild some structures that are more equitable, just, and loving, and have better experiences. So yeah, so thank you for that. I just, honoring Rob and Shruti, for their part about that.
So tell us about y'all's brilliance.
Yeah. Yeah, so like everything needs a model, right? I mean, we were right, we've got a colon in our book, the main title and then the subtitle. We've got a model, and it's a circle, which seems to be the thing these days. So what it was funny, we didn't start with all this organized in this way. We started when we were doing this work and laying it out, we started talking about what are the essentials, what is identity. We didn't have the name for it back then, but what became identity consciousness? What does that look like? And what are key components to it? And we listed, I think, 10 or 12 of them, and then began to shuffle them around and organize them away. And then when we were writing the book, it actually became clear for us that there was 3 levels of work that we had hoped to do. The first one was, because that's individual level, that self-work that I as a supervisor or I as a supervisee want to be doing to increase my identity consciousness. Then we also began to recognize, well, that there's a power and positionality about being a supervisor within an organization. And so that there's role, there's responsibilities and awareness and skills that are important about supervisors as a level of supervisors and managers within organizations, about work that the group can do. And that's actually, we started with those 2 levels. And then as we were talking, we were like, well, what does that mean if we're just trying to do that with ourselves? So we also have a responsibility to our organization. And so that's that systems change stuff. And the work and responsibilities that we want to be paying attention to, even though we may not be working at that right away. And so it's actually, it mirrors work we do in social justice education, and in particular SJTI too, about the individual, group, and system organizational levels. And so it ended up, so this reflects that. We intentionally didn't want this to be a checklist or a step-by-step or a progressive thing. So that's because I think that gets us, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but I think there's so much of the tactile, transactional part of leadership and supervision that just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. And that's not, we're going to talk about some of those things, but this isn't about that idea. But we also wanted to acknowledge that this ebbs and flows. And so this is where the circles and the swirls came. And so this is how we came up with the kind of waterish diagram, is that even when I'm working at these levels, we never get to be experts. We're never there. It is a constant practice. And we continue to have learning edges and places to grow individually. But as we know, our teams are constantly evolving too. We have people come and we have people go. Organization may shift and move our responsibilities around, so our teams may be changing that way. we as people are also dynamic. And so we're growing and changing. And so the supervision that I needed when I was 25 is different than the supervision that I needed when I'm 45. And so recognizing that flow. So, so I think the first part is centering with ourselves. Relationships are at the heart of everything that we do. If we don't have good relationships with people, none of this matters. And that's, that's that liberatory part of recognizing that we need to have really good, solid consciousness, conscious aware conversations with ourselves as well as with the people that we work with. That includes students as well as our colleagues and leadership. And so we want to be in relationship, and that's where a lot of that identity consciousness comes from, that I'm paying attention to my own identities, how that interacts with another's identities, and what's that interrelationship. And it leads into some of the sessions that you and I have done, Tanya, about that cross identity work. Yep. And how to do that well. But it's really starting with that. To be able to do that, I have to know who I am individually and how that shows up. And I will say, I think part of where that's like being a good person, being a well-informed person isn't enough. That I have to also be doing something with that. And so that's part of that action to set up a relationship with the people we work with and begin to have these conversations. I think that spinning out of that, the 3 purple wings, I guess, the fan blades, acting with courage, creating and sustaining a sense of self, and managing power, I think are important parts that are all 3 levels, but really stem from that individual part that I need to be courageous to, I need to be courageous. There's lots of ways that this shows up. One is, if we haven't been having these conversations in the past, then for me to be courageous to say, I want this to be a part of our relationship and how we're working together. Recognizing that we have to build trust to be able to make that happen. Right. Because that vulnerability that requires has been used against people for hundreds of years, and still is. And so how do we set ourselves up to be able to ease into those relationships and those conversations to talk about? I think about one of the ways that we're talking about it now on our campus is colleagues and employees with families working from home have to manage family life and family responsibilities and work life and work responsibilities different. And so how are we giving space to that? But being able to be to a place where somebody can feel comfortable saying, either having kids run around in the background, or to be able to say, can we meet later because X, Y, and Z is happening in our house. There's still people who don't trust the organization, who are trying to hide that, trying to be professional. And it's just, so having people, and it's hard. Like, I think that's when we get into some of these oppressive cultures, where if we're trying to deny parts of ourselves and trying to protect ourselves, that we're not feeling great within an organization, and we're not getting, when I'm doing that, I'm not doing my best work. I mean, the students aren't getting my best efforts, and my colleagues aren't getting their best efforts. So courage to paying attention to that, the sustaining that. How do we sustain this over time? That it's not just once a month that I have these conversations, or once a year, which a lot of organizations do. Here's the annual training that you'll have about equity and inclusion. That this become an everyday thing, and it show up not just in these intentional conversations, but that it shows up in every aspect of how I interact. And then managing power, that I'm using my power for good, to make a difference, that it comes with. I have access to different tables and different conversations in different groups than others do, because of where I sit within the organization. So how are we using that to I think budgetarily, there's, how do I use the budget to help others get access to the resources that they need to be able to do their job, but also how am I raising issues with the next level up, advocating for the team, advocating for the work that we're doing, and going there.
So this I love this model, and this might be an odd question because I heard you
Yeah.
say it is like water.
Mm.
And so this is going to be odd. Uh, if you were to like think about the movement of it, like how is it moving? Like because what I see in it and what I heard you say is that the individual work is where like it's a start place.
Mhm.
But I know also because I know you and Robin Shruti, um, that the individual work doesn't stop. It's not like a
Right.
static individual. And because it's like water, I just am picturing it kind of flowing out, but then flowing back in and then flowing back out and flowing back in, that
Yeah.
becomes the movement of the
Yeah.
model.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. It reminds me of, water and ripples, like
Mhm.
splashes or ducks or birds. I think, that when they land, they send waves out, but then they kind of at some point bounce back against the shore or something else, and they come back. And right, so it's constant, ever flowing, ever engaging. I'm learning all the time. I still make some mistakes all the time, and so learning, you know yeah, just that we continue to be in humility with ourselves, and continue to learn and grow with that's also part of it, that we can role model that growth and change too, and inspire others to follow us, that we begin to inspire that. It's the lifelong learner idea that we have at our institutions, that we're continuing to read, grow, and the world grows and changes. The next generation is always different, and they bring new energy, new thoughts, new ideas,
Yeah.
and spark change. And so it's that, yeah, it's just, and I think that I say this is, I've never wanted to become a senior administrator who couldn't evolve with the changing world.
Mhm.
And so for me, that I tried to carry on with that, that I'm continuing to grow and learn and inspired by what's happening around me. Um, so yeah.
I love
And
this.
again, I think, yeah, and I think the other part about it that makes me think about it, so thank you for that, is that our our institutions and our situation at work is always changing.
Mhm.
We just got a new president in our institution a couple of years ago, and that has changed everything. um, and I go to the Buddhist way, that sometimes I have feelings about it, but it isn't like, it's not about attachment. It's
Yeah.
the change isn't good or bad.
Yeah.
It is. And it's me learning to make those adjustments. And sometimes those are hard changes. There are definitely hard things about it. And when we get new people in our lives, that the chemistry changes, the dynamic changes.
Mhm.
And so it helps me be in humility about, like, okay, how am I creating those kinds of things for others,
Mhm.
so that if I'm joining a new department or have a new supervisee, or I have new responsibilities, and I'm coming in, how can I approach them thoughtfully with that in mind? um, so that it's, because I'm disrupting, I mean, it's disruptions, but I think we get stuck because we think it's static. We think our
Yep.
organizations are static and are always going to be the same, and they're not. So I think kind of related to that, I think it ties into that kind of group level, that we continue to, as in our roles as supervisors, continue to foster identity, growth, and development, that we continue that work for ourselves, but also spread that forth. We need to learn how to balance the working and partnering with our colleagues in their fullness, and with the expectations of the job. That I think we can do both, but it's important. We don't want to just have it be all about, you have to show up and do the work, and it doesn't matter what's happening in your life around you. Which I think I had some positions that was the mentality and the culture.
Mhm.
At the same point, we've got um, we can't just have all of our lives take over, and then occasionally when we're ready, we'll show up for work. But there are students, there's work to be done. There's important work to be done. Our students need us, and in some key areas. And so how do we really balance those dynamics? It's great when it works. The challenge is when things are bumpy. And so how do we needle through that? And I think that the third thing about conflict, about anytime we're in a relationship with anybody, there's going to be conflicts that we have to learn to navigate. And that can be our personal relationships that we have with our family or friends or partners, long-term partners that we're in a relationship with, but it's definitely with our employees as well. And reframing conflict so that it can be a positive thing. Because it doesn't have to be negative.
Absolutely. And it's, I think about the LeaderShape, when we talk about conflict or talk about community at the Institute, that conflict is part of community. And so
Yes.
it's one of those things that just is and is,
Yeah.
and our ability to respond with it and to it, and actually tells us if we see it as a negative or just an is.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
I love that a couple of folks brought in some images in our conversation about the flow. Individual work as a current. I love that. Currents change. Absolutely. The individual is going to constantly change. And then the pinwheels, I think that they're called.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love those. That's great. Yeah.
It helps us kind of visualize. I'm a very visual person, so metaphor absolutely helps.
Yeah.
This is really a powerful model, and I love that you all really went after trying to share it and understand it, like, because supervision is, I think, something in a United States culture. Supervision is something that we want. It is a sign that we are, moving up the ranks, and, we can have all kinds of feelings about that and how that connects to white supremacy. And
yes,
what I hear and what you all are doing is, so there is a way to be a socially just supervisor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, if you can do that, you can move us all towards further social justice.
Yeah. 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 That's I think that was one of the best summaries of what we're talking about. Thank you for that. It's like, it's possible. So I think we were talking about having critical hope. Like this was our offering for critical hope and possibility. That it's, and I think Rob said this in another conversation that we had. Things don't have to be the way that they are.
Absolutely.
And so I think there's our critical part about that, to say, like, critical evaluative part, like, oh no, like this isn't working for us, for a lot of people. But also that possibility of, like, oh, we can change it. And so so for us, it was this, and it ties right in, I think, to what LeaderShape talks a lot about living a space of possibility, of how can imagine the world that could be. And then what can I do to help create that? And this is an opportunity, I think about, like, back before the pandemic and we were all working from home, like, I spent more time with my work colleagues than I did with my family. And so how do I reframe that relationship to say that I don't know that I want to go as far as to say that work colleagues should be family, but how do I approach those relationships differently than these are just people that I go to work with, or these are just people that I tell what to do to go do things, or that for me it's, and it's, so I try, like, I'm a soccer player, and so very much it's a collective sport, that teams win because 11 people figure out how to play really beautiful soccer together, and there's chemistry, and there's practice and attention, and for me how do I approach work with that idea that everybody's got a role, everybody has strengths and gifts, but it's about us playing well together, that creates these transformative experiences. So
I so love that, Craig, because what I hear in that is that sometimes we move into workspaces and bring, the energy of what we've learned in a system of white supremacy and racism and sexism, and turn them into competition spaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
And soccer, I'm gonna keep with your metaphor. Soccer is first a game, and the game is a competition between two players, but it is first a
Right.
game. And so it's meant
Right.
to be fun and light.
Yeah.
And so for us to move into work
Mm,
in that space,
right.
for me, it connects to that, not the very outer circle, but that sustaining identity consciousness and
Yeah.
influencing institutional change. Like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, if each department on every campus around the nation had a supervisor that understood identity conscious supervision, what would be the, again, going back to the ripple, what would be the impact of that on
Yeah.
campuses? Like that
Yeah.
transforms cultures.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right. And I think of it like it made me think about like if not only we knew it like that I think it like I thought when you said that kind of the intellectual knowing,
Mhm.
but also like if we add to that or
Yeah,
clarify that it's with it, I know you do, but this embodied knowing of
yeah,
what identity
yeah.
consciousness is, and it makes me think about like you know right after I was just saying so Ahmaud Arbery,
Hmm.
it was the anniversary of his murder yesterday I think. And that was one of many
Hmm.
um, tragic murders this last year, and we I don't know that we are good about acknowledging how that lands differently on the people we work with. And so it's also that embodied like for me to continue to grow and stretch to where I can say that I can recognize what just happened, and that people coming to work may be feeling that differently. And so then how do we then say, I know we've got some things to do today, but how are you, where are you, what can shift?
And Craig, I
um
want to highlight something that you just said and how you did it. Because what I think people often hear is, okay, now I've got to ask, insert
right.
racial identity, how they're
Yeah.
doing, and assume that they're feeling awful. And
Right.
so I got to treat them with kid gloves. I've got to,
Right.
what I heard you say was, I've just got to be conscious to the fact that there are multiple, people are carrying multiple identities.
Yeah.
This identity might have experienced some impact, so I'm going to create some space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you don't have to know anything other than like
Right.
your human
Right.
connections.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
feel your feelings.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like just it shouldn't be this hard, and it is, and it's like it's there's my own wish to be better sometimes, which but it's also like we aren't trained to do this. I mean, so we were laughing before we got in here, like there was no supervision class that I ever took in grad school or any of my onboarding. Nobody taught me that how to hold all of these things all at the same time, like it's work and people. And that you're part of coaching,
Mhm.
being a part of that growth and
Absolutely.
coaching. Nobody ever told me that. Um, and so I think that the grace that I want to continue to offer myself to say um, that it's that I understand why and to keep going better. But like you said, I don't have to know anything to connect with somebody.
Yeah. I love what Vernon has said. This is so much about
Right?
unlearning what we've been taught about what effective supervision is,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing what I'm getting in this conversation, and the beauty of what you all have done is recognizing that we have learned supervision through a power over lens.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is a
Yeah.
very much power with. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
gonna shake our way of being with each other,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
super exciting to me.
No. Right. It's um, yeah. The creative destruction about that. Yeah. But right. It's so I will add, like, this, it's white supremacist way. It's male kind of hegemonic way. And these are big words to talk about. Like, it's the coded, it's a matrix. I love the matrix. And it's like this, I think sometimes gives us the opportunity to see the code that's flowing, and we can go, oh, right. And but shifting for sure. We actually talk about that in the book. Just power with, and it has the potential to reshift everything, and it's going to be like, so interesting from a systems perspective that not everybody's going to be like loving that like you're doing things differently in the system, and encountering resistance, and we could do a whole book on resistance. I think Jamie Washington has
That's
so much
Dr.
brilliance
Jamie
about that.
me.
Yeah, exactly.
He changed my life with that.
Yes, right. But just talk about that I think, so it is, it's like, it's intentional, long-term sustained intentional effort. Like, I think to really do this work in any kind of liberatory movement, it's that we're buckling in for the ride.
Yes, I'd love that. Absolutely buckled in for the ride. Yeah. And knowing that the ride is going to,
yes,
do what it does. And
right.
And that's absolutely okay. We don't have to be afraid of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And with this model, what I'm getting is that I not only don't have to be afraid of it, if I'm actually in a relationship with people, I know that I have community with me that will help me move through the ride.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're not alone.
Yeah.
And we need, I think honestly too, we need like in any kind of it's change effort, we need the community around. We can't do it alone. So I think this is also like countering whiteness and white supremacy, that the lone individual, like, that it's about us in partnership and community doing this work. But it's also how I recharge, recenter, reground. And again, I'm grateful for our 22 years of friendship and love for doing that. We keep calling each other to be like, oh, I need, help me through this, and just and Abby and Vernon and others here actually that I know, that just it's those relationships that help us through it and remind us of why we're in it, because I think sometimes the ride we can feel right here and lose the perspective about why this matters. And I think this reminds me, like, what matters about this is that it transforms relationships. It changes the way we engage with other people, like, or at the very least, we don't harm them.
Right.
Like, right. Like that we could do something that would just not cause harm at its least, and its most, that it could be something magical, transformative, liberatory, creative, sparking.
I want to highlight what you just said, Craig, and I also want to notice the time. I'm like, what? How is that possible? What you just said about how to not harm, I want to lift up that if you're missing, like if you're not bringing identity consciousness to your supervision, there's a good chance that you might be, like, I don't want to say inflicting harm, because that sounds like, but unconsciously you might be inflicting harm.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I also want to, and back me up on this, that does not mean that you're a bad person.
Yeah.
It just means that we unintentionally do some things as supervisors that if we're not conscious to them and paying attention and being thoughtful about all the things that you all name here, it can be landing as harm. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that even though I'm trying to do this doesn't mean that I don't cause harm either.
Yeah.
But it's this clarity of like, I don't want to cause harm. I want to be a part of something good.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to cause harm. And so I think it sets us it creates a different way to engage in our work and our relationship that I think matters and what I hope for.
So Craig, because we are at 50 after,
Yeah,
I know you had more things to talk about, but clearly we could
that's
do
okay. Right.
a podcast of some sort.
Oh, yes.
But what else would you like to share with us?
I think just quickly about I think the being and the doing, I think we talked a lot about it, but it really is, it's the work that we're doing, but it's also who we are, and it's both together. It's not one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I think, I can't remember what were those other questions, if there's anything. I think, yeah, again, so I think there's a good reflective questions for us as we begin to take from this and think about who am I as a supervisor, and what does this mean, and what can I start doing? I think these are good questions to ask ourselves.
I'd like that last one. It makes me think of psychosocialization and socialization. Like, how did I come to the consciousness of that I currently have about being a supervisor? Like,
right.
Can I look over my career and even reflect on the supervisors that I've had and think about like, ooh, what have I picked up along the way that is either like really great, or I can think of a couple of supervisors that they were
Totally.
nice people, but they didn't see me.
Right. Yeah.
And that was it was harmful.
Yeah. 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 It reminds me of one of the things. So again, so that's a powerful story that shaped who you are, in a lot of ways, in the moment, but I think also over time.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I love about how we wrote this book too is we also told some stories about those experiences that we had, both positive and negative, and that the names were changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. to protect the guilty, I guess. No, I could. And I will say my former supervisor is in this call. So John, none of this was you. So don't worry about it. But I think about like, and so there's one, so it reminds me like what you just said, I think is so powerful about, and this is back to the harm part about, we call them ghosts. That there's things that former supervisors have done that I still have a visceral response to.
Absolutely.
And mine was, like, come to my office, hey, can you come to my office? And so like that early in my career, I got chewed out, and there's like, and it hurt, like it was harmful.
Yeah.
Even to this day, that if anybody says to me, hey, can you come to my office? I'm like, oh shit, like what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And so I think about, again, back to that unintentional part, but I think that's to your point about the consciousness, like how do we build a new kind of consciousness?
Yes.
And what's that about, and how do we do it? And be in humility and grace about it, that it's a constant evolution, and much in the same way I think parenting my kids has been. Like I feel like I screw that up 20 times a day with my kids, and I think I get maybe one or two right, but there's something about who they've grown up to be that makes me think, okay, maybe I didn't screw it up as bad as I thought, and that I had some positive impact in that. So I think it's also how do we build our consciousness and be in the space of wanting to be a positive impact with each other, and do some good.
Abby, I think that there is another set of questions. I want to make sure that these get in as well. Brilliant questions. If people spend time with those questions, and of course get the book, but even if they just spend time with those questions, a lot is going to be uncovered. And I love that last one. How can we transform higher education through supervision? Like that's looking at what's possible.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, Craig, you know, anytime I get to talk to you, I'm good. And this conversation has been delightful.
Yes, yes.
We really, really thank you for your willingness to come and connect and share. And just want to say also thank you to all of the wonderful folks who came on. Well, we have right now about 50, but I think we got up to like 56, I think I saw. And I also want to leave you with a little bit of commercial on behalf of LeaderShape. And we have a lot of programs that are available for folks, and here they are right now. So there's Catalyst, there's Resilience, there's the Institute, of course, and then, of course, Courageous Dialogue. All of those can be found at leadershape.org. And we always welcome a phone call or an email if you just want to talk through like what do each of these programs offer, but then also what might be focus and direction that they can take on your campus. Thank you so much for joining us, and consider joining us tomorrow because I'm so excited. I was excited for this one. I'm excited for that one. Tomorrow we will be having our 5th and final conversation for the week, and I'll get to be back for that one. Leadership across social class. Let's name, recognize, and engage it. Sanja and Becky are bringing the fire. I am absolutely sure of it. And so you'll want to be back for that one. Thank you so much, my friend. This has been delightful. And thank you all for coming as well. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll hang around for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks y'all. And thanks T.
Oh, thanks, Abby. If you want to register for tomorrow's session.
Exactly.
On it.
Those housekeeping things.
Yeah, yeah. Coolio.